All right, so there was some significant damage within Israel due to an Iranian strike and an apparent interceptor fail. Let's go ahead and put this up on the screen. So this is from Haaretz. We now have some news that of deaths here. So rescue teams recover the bodies of 4 victims who were killed in an Iranian missile strike. This original headline said that 4 were feared trapped. Now we know that rescue teams have, in fact, recovered those bodies. They carried out careful operations at a 6-story residential building struck by an Iranian missile on Sunday night. The 4 were trapped on the building's bottom floor as the top 3 floors collapsed. And obviously what's significant here, Haifa's been hit a number of times, actually seems to be a real focus of Iranian efforts. And in addition, obviously the fact that you had an interceptor fail here and you have the Iranians able to still exact this kind of damage and actually kill Israelis within the state of Israel is quite extraordinary, and just shows you, obviously, they aren't backing down and they feel very much like they have the upper hand in a lot of ways.
Well, it's what we just talked about, is that when you open the door, to destruction of infrastructure and civilian death, well, then when Iran is able to do it on a much more limited scale, nobody's going to cry for you, right? Like, the Israelis are like, oh, well, they are targeting civilians. And you're like, well, it's one of those where they're kind of just doing what a lot of you guys have been doing, which I think neither party should do it. I think it's bad, but you can obviously see the degradation of the degradation of Israeli air defense systems, of their missile interceptors. Their Arrow 2 and 3s are running rapidly low. Remember that analysis I brought everybody. If the track of the first 16 days of war had continued, they would have run out as of a couple of days ago. And so they have to severely ration. The reason why Iran continues to strike Haifa is because of those oil refinery facilities. And actually, you can see it very obviously in the response of the Israelis. So can we put A12 up there on the screen? In retaliation for this strike, Israel just this morning attacked the largest petrochemical facility in Iran. According to the defense minister Katz, 2 facilities were responsible for 85% of Iran's petrochemical exports that have now been put out of operation. So obviously, this is in retaliation for multiple of these strikes, which have pummeled Haifa and the oil refineries over there. Israel is responding. The problem, though, is that it's not like Iran just responds to Israel and continues to hit their refineries. When their infrastructure goes out, then they respond to the U.S.-Israeli coalition of the UAE, Qatar, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia. Already, A11, if we can, up there on the screen. You can see the statement from the Ministry of Electricity and Water, Renewable Energy of Kuwait: assault on 2 power generation stations and water desalination plants in Kuwait. Remember, Iran is way less reliant on desalination plants than the Gulf countries, who only have like 2 weeks supply or something like that of water. It would be an absolute mission-critical disaster for them if this didn't end up happening. And we are setting the stage because we're still, 36 hours away from Trump's deadline. And if that does actually happen, the power plant strikes, we will see exactly this type of attack times 10. God only knows with the Straits of Hormuz and/or ground operations. So it's total war in the region.
Yeah, and we also haven't even... The Houthis have sent some sort, almost like warning strikes, but they have not operated to close the Bab el-Mandab Strait, which would further paralyze the oil markets. Now, I will say you were alluding to the fact there has been some reporting from the Strait of Hormuz that more is getting through than is readily available, but there's still no doubt the millions of barrels of oil a day that were getting on the market are no longer getting on the market. And also significant in terms of how this missile was able to evade Israeli interceptors that were fired at it. So apparently, number one, the warhead on the ground, this is a separate thought, but the warhead actually didn't detonate. So it would have been far more catastrophic for the Israelis if it had. It collapsed one building, but you would have had obviously a larger blast zone. But apparently it was able to sort of evade these interceptors and also to split into multiple pieces. And so this is a demonstration of higher level Iranian technology as well, which is part of why they've been able to continue to do the damage that they have. We know that according to our own intel, that that something like only a third of their missile stockpile has been destroyed. Another third may have been damaged or buried, but they've been able to re-access that sometimes within the same day. So they still have significant capabilities. They have still significant steps up the escalation chain that they could take. Within Israel, the public is overwhelmingly in favor of the war, although the support for it has slipped some as people are getting a little tired of living in bomb shelters all the time. And then with the Gulf states, you know, the logic for them is basically like, look, we're in this thing now. If you leave Iran with this regime in place, we are totally screwed. This is not a situation that we can live with.
It is untenable. I agree.
So you have UAE in particular saying like, listen, we'll go all in with you. We will be active combatants. They're the ones going to the UN to try to get this resolution passed of like, use any means necessary to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. So this hardening of logic is occurring on both sides, truly.
That's the problem. Also, literally while we're recording, this is from Trey Yanks and multiple other reporters, heavy incoming fire towards Tel Aviv. They are reporting, Jim Sciutto is there for CNN. He is saying similarly on the ground in Tel Aviv, quote, there are an unusual number of explosions during this air raid, multiple interceptions or attempted interceptions, possibly indicating multiple incoming missiles, 3 air raid warnings all in a row. So some very heavy missile incoming fire over Tel Aviv, the major city in Israel, demonstrating again of their missile capacity. And remember, they are rationing. They have been basically firing a number of missiles, but more in recent days than they did in the 2 to 3 weeks. They exhausted many of those interceptors, and that's why a lot of their stuff is now able to get through. They're saving the suicide attack drones and missiles for very precise targets in the Gulf, and we expect that to continue. And there will be some cope and potential propaganda from the U.S. government around how about if we take out the power plants, that this will reduce Iranian ballistic missiles. I was reading how exactly they're able to fire these missiles. It is First World War-esque. They have field telephones, which the type of things where you can crank like this, with buried underneath telephone wires between commanders who will pick up the phone and be like, fire at this target as in retaliation. And they have literal messengers. Like if you've ever watched the movie 1917, that's what remember they cut the telegraph wire and the guy has to go and deliver a message? That's literally what's happening. So this is, I mean, it's effectively bomb-proof. Like if they figured it out over 100 years ago on the Western Front, that's basically being recreated, just to show you all warfare eventually reverts down to the mean of messengers, field telephones, buried wires. And if you want to communicate, you will eventually figure it out in terms of the answer for, wait, why are we not able to disrupt it? It's because they're like, okay, our phones are bugged, can't use WhatsApp. That's what they're doing. Even if you wipe out the power plants, it's not like you're not gonna cut every wire. That was, you know, very often those were literally some of the goals, often of some of the artillery and mortar missions from the First World War. So, and then even when they were cut, you just use bodies and messengers. So that's the reality of war, and it will just continue. It's really bad.